I'm Sarah Baxley, and welcome to Pinkie the Bear. This is my mystics, metaphysics, and mindfulness channel, and I'm here today with your astrology forecast for the week of July 8th, 2018. Alright, so the themes of this week are tending to repairs that must be made and finding solid ground. Alright, so here we are, right? We finally have hit eclipse season. And basically what eclipse season means, or kind of that buzzword that's going on, is when there tends to be several eclipses close to one another. So we have an eclipse that's coming up this Thursday, July 12th, at 20 degrees Cancer. We have another eclipse that comes up the end of July. That's a total lunar eclipse. That's on July 27th at 4 degrees Aquarius. And then we have a third eclipse that is on August 11th, and that is, I believe, at 19 degrees Leo. So anyway, so if you hear the buzzword of eclipse season going on, that is what that means. And generally with eclipses, they're basically major turning points. You know, a lot of you, especially have been following some of my work online. I work a lot with the cycles of the moon, the new moon, the beginning of a story, the first quarter moon, the rising action, the full moon, which is like the climax or peak of a story. Then we wind down to the last quarter moon, which is kind of the last turning point. And then the moon wanes and gets smaller and smaller until we hit the next new moon, which is the beginning of the next new chapter. So eclipses are similar with that because they have to do with the moon, but basically a solar eclipse is a new moon, so it's like the beginning of a chapter, but it's like a new moon on steroids. It's like a very intense type of chapter, right? And a solar eclipse happens when basically the moon comes over in front of us. Like if I'm Earth, if my head is Earth, and you are the sun, and I'm looking at you, a solar eclipse is when the moon comes to completely block the sun, right? So anyway, so a solar eclipse is basically marks the beginning of a new chapter, but it's like I said, it's like a more intensified chapter. We tend to see a lot of events happening both the 3 days before and 3 days after a solar eclipse. That's kind of when a lot of the intensity occurs. But with solar eclipses, much like new moons, signify the beginning of a new chapter, like a new endeavor of our lives, essentially. So a lot of times events that you know, are initially signified at the solar eclipse, you know, sometimes they take a few weeks or months sometimes to transpire. And then, yeah, so then we come to lunar eclipse. So a lunar eclipse is the opposite. Again, if you're the sun and I am Earth, right? It's when the moon comes and it's literally like right behind, and so the Earth, right, casts a shadow onto the moon. And so that's why we see like lunar eclipses, the blood moons or whatever that have kind of like a reddish shade. That's from the Earth's shadow. And lunar eclipses happen at full moons, right? And so lunar eclipses signify, just as a solar eclipse signifies a new beginning, lunar eclipses signify endings, right? They're often relationship oriented, but it's basically the end of a chapter. And we can definitely feel intensity 3 days before or 3 days after, but generally it's kind of the end of a chapter of our lives. It's kind of the end of something happening. So we don't really see the effects of lunar eclipses much for, you know, weeks or months afterwards, because it was not like a new beginning like the solar eclipse was. So anyway, that's just kind of to give you a tidbit, right? So we have, again, solar eclipse, new beginning starting next week, and then we have lunar eclipse signifying ending. That's at July 27th, and then we have another solar eclipse, new beginnings, and that is on August 11th. So anyway, so that's kind of a quick little tidbit, but I would like to get back to where we're at for this week. So again, the themes for this week are tending to repairs that must be made and finding solid ground. So, you know, the thing that's interesting about there's a couple things that happened this week. We have a a Jupiter square Mercury, we have Jupiter stationing direct in Scorpio, and then we have the full the solar eclipse that happens on Thursday. And then there's also a grand Earth trine at the end of the week. So I'm going to break down what all of that actually means for you. So, you know, the thing is that this solar eclipse that's coming up on Thursday, it opposes Pluto. And, you know, so, you know, there's going to be kind of some themes that are happening with the beginning of the week where, you know, certain things are going to surface to really show us kind of whether or not there's power struggles involved, or maybe some type of regeneration that's trying to happen. But we're really going to kind of see, you know, the areas of our lives that really need kind of tending to, kind of like the repairs that have to be made, right, in order for us to kind of move into this next new chapter of our lives. We had a solar eclipse back in February that was February 15th, but see, that solar eclipse was conjunct the south node, and basically all eclipses happen within 19 degrees of the nodes. And you know, south nodes kind of, there tends to be a little bit more static up in the mix with south node eclipses. This one is a north node solar eclipse. It is beginning of a new chapter in the direction that we're supposed to be headed in. And, you know, the thing is that with these, you know, with this eclipse that's coming up, are we, you know, what are the things that we still have to do before we can kind of like launch into this next phase of our lives, you know? The momentum, I'm sure some of you maybe have already been feeling it kind of build up. Generally, when the moon is waning and getting smaller and smaller in the sky, you know, energy tends to wind down a bit more and all of that kind of stuff. And, you know, when we get to an eclipse, it's kind of interesting because there's so much energy that happens around eclipse times that instead of kind of feeling the natural waning sensation that we often feel when the moon is getting smaller and smaller visibly in the sky, it's almost like there is kind of a buildup that's happening. And right now, this week, that buildup that is happening is basically signifying for us to tend to all of the shit that we haven't tended to, right? That's kind of still holding us back a little bit before we can launch into this next new chapter of our lives. So again, this eclipse is going to be in Cancer, and Pluto is in Capricorn. I know that for those of you that saw the video for the full moon last week, you know, that's kind of the same polarity that we're working with, right? Nurturing our emotions, nurturing our feelings, nurturing what feels good to us, nurturing those things that are comforting to us, and nurturing ourselves so that way we are in a position to nurture others. If we don't stop and take care of ourselves first, we're not going to be able to provide that safe space and loving, you know, companionship for others. So anyway, so that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the other thing is finding solid ground. So we're going to have all of this energy that's kind of like been building up. There definitely, again, could be some type of power struggle or, you know, kind of like some sensation of like wanting to break free, specifically emotionally, as Pluto is opposite, so 180 degrees away from this eclipse this week. So we might, you know, there's a lot of energy that's generated around this. And towards the end of the week on Friday, we have kind of a loose grand Earth trine. And this is kind of the first Earth trine that we've had in a while. It's with Saturn, so like creating stability, with Uranus, which is, you know, unexpected change like within our physical environment in Taurus, and then Venus in Virgo, so really kind of tying up loose ends and being very detail oriented. So, you know, towards the end of this week, a lot of it is going to be grounding, kind of like we've started this new chapter, let's find some solid ground, you know, so that way we can kind of move forward. So anyway, so that's kind of the snapshot for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. And if you think someone else would like this video, then go ahead and share it with them. So anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you around. Cheers.